On Wednesdays on office hours, we typically focus on audio. And for a ton of the content we consume, a key audio element is VO or voiceover, that guiding voice that carries a lot of responsibility for information transfer in all types of content. VO is a huge area and encompasses a lot of subgenres. There's business narration, commercials, similar spot work, full-length audiobook recordings, animation, cartoon character work, e-learning, video game acting. There's just a huge list of under the general heading of VO, and there's a huge market out there, but there's also never been more people trying their hand at VO. Back when I started, you typically needed to go into a commercial studio to do it. Those days are long gone, and home recording is now the rule. And with much more affordable recording gears these days, the competition for VO geeks can be fierce. Plus, as everybody knows, you keep hearing the same kind of things on YouTube and voice and Facebook in explainers and things like that. Machine learning and AI is nibbling away and putting some pressure on areas of the VO industry via generative voice technology. To make sense of all of it, we've assembled a stellar panel of VO experts to help us navigate the whole thing. First up, I get to welcome back to Office Hours George Whittam. George the Tech. George is responsible for the sound quality of more than 4,000 clients over the last 20-plus years. Also on the panel today, George's longtime comrade in arms, Dan Lenard. For 13 years, he and George co-hosted the popular VoiceOver Body Shop, a webcast dedicated to all things VO. Dan's a freelance producer, professional voice artist, and professional home recording studio consultant. Also the president of World Voices organization. Byron Wagner is a voice actor who created and patented the first ISDN audio codec for use in audio narration, commercial animation, and ADR clients. And last but certainly not least, Jodi Krangle has done voiceover work for the healthcare, corporate, hospitality, political, and nonprofit sectors, among many others. We are super fortunate today to have the collected wisdom of this stellar panel to address all your questions about VO in all of its myriad forms. George, I'm going to start with you. It's no secret that the VO industry is both thriving and undergoing a ton of changes these days. What's at the top of your radar screens as you survey where the industry is today?
Oh boy, well, I'm certainly focused highly on the technology. My directive has always been to focus on tools and techniques that the actor can use to produce their audio effectively, high quality, and really efficiently with the least amount of stress and steps. The actor's job has evolved over the years, but certainly in the years that I've been involved with studios, the actor's job has become heavily stilted towards engineering. And so I want to make sure that that burden is, reduced on their shoulders because, the more the actor has to handle those multiple hats that they have to wear, the more that's going to detract from their ability to do what they're hired to do, which is act. So I'm always there to try to protect them from the rat hole of technology. But those that do come and want to venture into the rat hole, I'm there to travel with them, whether it's exploring 32-bit float recording or using newer AI noise reduction tools. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing. AI noise reduction has changed the game and the ability to pull off, let's just say pull it off. Things that you can pull off now in environments that you couldn't before has changed the game in a way. So that's probably the biggest way AI is supporting what we do. We can certainly look at the ways that it detracts from what we do, but I'm not interested in that so much.
Dan, you're in Sherman Oaks, so you're adjacent to the country's largest production market, Los Angeles. What are you seeing as you survey the VO landscape from your perspective?
As George was saying, or as you were saying earlier, there's a lot of people getting into voiceover, which is a great thing and a bad thing because the market is completely oversaturated with a lot of people who are told, you have a great voice, but that doesn't, that doesn't exactly come across if you can't read your way out of a paper bag. So it's important that if you're going to get into voiceover, not to invest heavily up front. It's not the technology that's going to get you successful. It's your ability to be a good actor. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people I see coming into the business. I will only work with people who I think can actually be one out of 1,000 that's actually going to make a living doing this. And when they do it, It's great work. It's a lot of fun. You meet incredible people like Byron and George and Jodi, who are three of my closest friends in the voiceover world. That's what I like about the voiceover business is the camaraderie amongst the real professionals that do it. It's great to see new people coming in and seeing new fresh talent and things like that. But it's a rough time in the industry. There's an animation strike that may happen, and there's a number of other problems in the business. But what I see, and I've been saying for years in this business, is it goes like this, it goes like this, and you've got to be able to adapt and be able to compete in that marketplace as things change, because AI is certainly coming in there. But those who have the ability to adapt to the market changes to their advantage will probably succeed at it.
For those of you on audio only, you missed the roller coaster hand gesture, which we all resonated with all of us. It was great. Byron, as well as talent work, you're dialed into the tech sides of the industry. What are the changes you see coming in the recording, processing, and distribution of creative content these days?
Well, the major, I'll avoid for a moment the elephant in the room, which is AI and its potential contribution. But in terms of technology, stuff just keeps getting better. I mean, I've been waiting 8 years to be able to have 32-bit float so that I don't have to twiddle my knobs. And they're not like the old days when you had a Davenport with detents and you could put it back exactly where it was. So being able to scream into my microphone, occasionally intentionally, and not have to change the gain is beyond awesome. And now, Zoom has the UAC 232 for $200. It's built into a Rode NT1 5th generation with a USB-C jack in the middle of the Canon XLR. Oh my God, that was brilliant. So, and I saw SSL just released a 32-bit float. So things like that, and things like the software that continues to get refined in terms of being an advocate for the non-tech person is amazing. And the incredible algorithmic, the things that George was talking about, me being one of the rats in his particular hole, is really, really successful, not yet for the high-end stuff. I do a lot of audiobooks. And so ironically, after years of being a recording engineer for multi-track music and analog, and have the razor blade scars on my hand from the 2-inch tape and the edit all block. Anyway, all of that stuff is amazing, but when you do audiobooks, there's no bass drum, there's no bass guitar to mask the low end stuff. So you need much, much, much better signal to noise, dynamic range, all that stuff. And so if you're doing a podcast, or if you're doing a VO, or even an animation audition, you can get away with, in a pinch, using some of the current noise reduction stuff. So that's wonderful, wonderful stuff. But a lot of it isn't quite ready for the real prime time yet, but I continue to take advantage of whatever I can.
Jodi, as rats keep coming up, who's moving the cheese around you these days? All the changes that are going on in VO, what are your clients and contacts addressing what they're seeing across the VO landscape?
I think that, we all have that, like Byron was saying, the elephant in the room, the AI. I think, though, that people are leaning human. Because I think what's been happening is that people are trying the AI voices that are out there at the moment, and they're just not measuring up. And it's not necessarily that they're not good enough. It's just that it's taking them 2 or 3 hours to get it good enough, when a VO could get that for you in 10 minutes. So it's become more trouble than it's worth, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, I think it's getting better all the time. So that may not be the case for very much longer. We'll see. But at the very least, I think that if you're looking at the audio brand of your brand, the way that you present yourself to the outside world, being genuine means using human. And as much as AI can help with all of the little in-between stuff and make things easier and work with people on, refining ideas and refining audio, it's not so great at starting it off. So, we need to sort of still lean into our own humanness in the creative part of that. And I don't think that should be left behind. But, there's a lot of different opinions on that. So there's just so much AI stuff coming out that we just don't understand yet, and we just have to be ready for it. That's all we can do.
Change is inevitable. When I was starting back in the 1970s, the standard was you go into a studio, they give you a piece of copy, and in 30 seconds, they expect a 30-second take that was usable. I mean, you could do it multiple times, but at the end of it, that was the spot. That's what ran. There was no editing. There was no fiddling around with it. You could either do the work or not. So let's dive in gently before we get to all our audience questions to this whole generative thing. I keep seeing these explainers and things like that, and I can tell in almost the first 5 seconds. I've heard that voice 70 times today because somebody just clicked on read this script. And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm dismissing it out of hand. If somebody didn't take the time to do more than just write a bad script, and most of the people generating these are not professional writers, and then you're putting it into a generative AI thing, trying to do a generated voice of a bad script, it's just depressing to see some of the results. And I want to dive out as soon as I hear that voice, whether it's the Bill voice or the Alex voice or one of the other voices that we just hear over and over again. So does anybody want to raise a hand and take a shot at what you think the right performance perspective is, how you approach getting a script and making it something better that an algorithm can produce? Anybody want to dive into that? I see Byron's hand coming up. So Byron, take off.
And me too.
Okay, we'll get you there.
I'll make worse mistakes. I just can't think of any offhand. Humans are really, really good at pattern recognition. And in today with the interwebs and everything else, it's not like the old days when you had a storefront and you had stationery with your corporate design and branding and, all of that stuff and the livery on your delivery truck. So the only way that people know who you are and potentially get a sense of whether or not to trust you with their hard-earned after-tax dollars is the impression that you leave with them when they see some of your work or when they see, some of the way that you communicate. So, I mean, we were talking beforehand about I had seen the show Stereophonic on Broadway last Friday. It was awesome. But they had a Studer 24 track, which cost an awful lot of money in those days, and only some of the the grain of wheat bulbs on the VU meters were working. And I said, man, if I walked into a studio where some of the bulbs were out on the meters, I'd turn around and go get another studio, because the implication was, geez, if they don't even replace the light bulbs on the VU meters, who knows what their bias current is like, and who knows if the heads have been aligned or degaussed recently. So it's if you map that across onto this, my response to your observation and your, throwing up a little bit in your mouth is that that's exactly the way that everybody will respond to anything once they understand a little bit about the quality that's involved. And in this case, it's not even something subtle. It's, wow, this is really annoying. Wow, this is really terrible. And so I think that will map across to everybody's experience.
Use the word trust, which I think is a difficult to define thing, but it's a real part, particularly in these commercial transactions. I mean, you're doing a commercial or something like that. You're hoping that the audience will trust what you're telling them about the quality of the product or the service involved. If that gets taken if it gets diminished in the transaction, you kind of wonder how things are going to proceed from there. Let's dive into our first few questions here from our audience.
First one comes in from Matt Halverson in Booking, South Dakota. Says, I know you're all professionals, but I work with amateurs every day. What advice do you give to someone doing their first voiceover?
George, you must see this a lot. Dive in on this.
Well, I certainly do work. I work with the gamut. And, I think some of the mistakes would certainly be overspending on the tech and underspending on the career advice, career coaching, performance coaching, and all the actual coaching work. This is the non-fun, especially for us and our audience who are certainly going to lean towards the tech, tech file side of things. We love tech. It's so easy to overinvest and overspend on the tech and kind of go crazy with building the ultimate studio. Now you've got this incredibly good sounding studio and you don't have the chops to back it up. You don't have the marketing. You don't have the entrepreneur training. So it's a very holistic thing, and you really want to make sure that you have a coach and somebody you're working with that's going to direct you into those things at the right times. But at the very beginning, you really just need to have a decent microphone that literally costs almost anything, but a proper studio shape microphone so you can learn mic technique and learn how to record your voice. You don't have to have high-end gear to get started at all. So that would be one main thing, that just people overspend in the wrong areas and they kind of lose focus of what's really important, which is the acting.
Byron?
I think it's really important that, let me back up a little bit. People who are not familiar with a particular technique or modality make a lot of assumptions based on their inexperience. So, and it's very common. The first thing that a lot of people would do is go, oh, I should sound like a professional VO. So they do a Gary Owens imitation. And now my golden pear-shaped tones will persuade you to do what I'm telling you to do. And that's all wrong. First of all, stylistically, the thing that people have been putting on the top of the specs for auditions for years has been conversational. And it's exactly, Bill, what you were talking about in terms of trust. They don't want to be sold to. They really like the idea. And, Jodi's a master at this. They want to hear, they want somebody to inform them and convey maybe some excitement about, wow, I just found this great new cheese. It's awesome. And that's what so to kind of undo all of that kind of years of media training of, this is what a VO should sound like. To tell somebody who's never done this before, that funny crick, the frog in your throat, the gravel in your voice, that's why they hired you. Don't smooth off the rough edges. The classic, be yourself because everybody else is already taken. That's really a huge thing. Now, when you then add in, I'm going to ignore for a moment the idea that somebody has to suddenly deal with learning about acoustics and building a home studio and getting rid of the weed whackers and the leaf blowers and the lawn mowers. I mean, it's like that's a whole other universe of issues. So for the moment, the question was, what's your advice to somebody who's doing a VO for the first time? The answer is, you've got YouTube, which gives you ultimate power, and you can kind of sit in on recording sessions. There are things where I occasionally will narrate live on Discord or YouTube or whatever. You can learn, you can shadow people without even having to know them and go, oh, that's what give me 3 means. Oh, that's why, oh gosh. And maybe you can even see people talking into the wrong side of the microphone and learn not to do that. But anyway, so the simple advice to somebody for the first time is learn, get coaching, watch the good stuff on YouTube, because there's a lot of misinformation, and have a good time.
Jodi?
Yeah, I think Byron had some really good advice there. The first one being, be you, because that's why they would hire you. You are different from anyone else. Otherwise, they'd hire someone else. So be you uniquely with the perspective that you are enjoying this product or selling this product or telling your best friend about this particular school or this particular hospital or whatever it is that you're doing. It's still you. It just depends on who you're talking to. So think about it from perspectives of who you're talking to, because this is a dialogue. It's always a dialogue. Someone asked you a question, you are answering that question. And when you answer that question, are you speaking to your mom? Are you speaking to a 7-year-old? Are you speaking to your best friend over coffee? When your perspective changes, your tone changes, but it's still you. It's all you. And the other thing that I would say is this is a business. So do not forget to invoice, have an invoicing system in place, figure out what your expenses are and keep track of them. All of this stuff that you need for taxes, because if you really want to make this your living, you need to be able to pay taxes. You need to treat this as a business and start it from the beginning, because boy, does it get really hard to do later.
What? You can make money at this? Damn it.
So Jodi just jumped into what I was thinking. This is an entrepreneurial business. This is not show business. Everybody wants to be a star. This is not what voiceover is about. Yes, it's about acting. Yes, it's about having the talent to do it. but you are not trying to talk to 1,000 people over the network or anything. You're talking to one person. And I think that's the biggest mistake that most people make, is that they think, oh, I'm going to be a big star. I'm going to be able to do this. This is an entrepreneurial business. And Jodi was right on. You've got to be able to do your booking. You've got to be able to keep your own accounting books. Make sure that you're invoicing out. I mean, those are all important things. And not to get a big head about, oh, I'm going to be this big star doing this. This is not show business. And if you think it is, you're already way behind the eight ball. It's smart entrepreneurial people that will succeed at this business. The question was, what do you do for your first voiceover? I'm not exactly sure what that means. What is your first voiceover? If you're able to book a job, that's key, because that means you're better than a lot of other people, or we're right for that particular spot or whatever recording that they want done. So just remember, this is a business. This is not a hobby. If you want to do it as a hobby, you're going to spend a lot of money for things that you don't need, like George said, and you're going to be frustrated at trying to make a living at this. You've got to think of it as a business.
All right, let's go to our next question.
All right, Bill, next question comes in from George Whittam in Venice, California, and here on our esteemed panel. Looks like George is going to get into religion here. He asks, Mac or PC for VO?
Yes, you should use one, or Linux. Jodi, dive into this. What are you using?
Well, I'm just going to say whatever you are most comfortable with, because I don't think it really matters. The computers these days are pretty similar. You're going to get the same amount of processing power from each one. I happen to be PC, so that's probably, like anathema for anyone like this is thinking of this. But I have been on PC since DOS. So I understand it. I know what's under the hood. I know how to make it work. That's me. That may not be everyone else. And I am satisfied with the way that it works. I create the same WAV file everyone else does. I could use the same audio recording software that anyone else can use. It's just a different way of using your computer. And I happen to understand PC more than Mac. So that's my religion of choice.
Dan, which direction are you bowing towards? Whoops, I think you're still zooming.
Keep muting me. George and I have always been, Apple people, and there's a reason for that, because we're troubleshooters. We're people who help people with their sound, and I would say an exceedingly high percentage of recording problems come because it's a PC. There's just a lot of variables. There's a lot of things running in the background. Sometimes it'll say, I don't like that interface you're using. I want you to use this one. And, it used to be a big problem. I don't know how bad it is right now. But Macs are designed for creative people. Their core audio system is a lot better. And I know there's some people out there, I don't like the politics of Apple. I don't want to use their product. It's like, okay. Anytime we encounter some sort of computer issue, the highest percentage, and I know Georgia will agree with me, is that it's a PC. Not that there's anything wrong with PCs for giving us models of global warming and things like that. But I won't hold it against Jodi. I mean, she wants to be PC and it works for her and she's experienced that. That's great. But Macs are far better for doing voice work, because the workflow inside the computer is a little bit better.
The score is currently tied. Byron, what's up?
Okay, I'm gonna start with the neutral. The bird's eye lowdown. The actual rule is very simple. I used to have an ISP that serviced the entertainment business. We didn't do dial-up. We only did ISDN or better, and unless you're on location. And the rule is really simple. Find the software that you need, and then whatever hardware that runs on, that's what you get. Otherwise, you have a boat anchor. Now, the good news is there's infinitely more choices now than there were, 30 years ago. So now let's get into the next thing. As Jodi was saying, learning curve. if you're extremely familiar with a particular OS, these days anymore, other than, kind of the things that Dan was talking about relative to the stability of the hardware, it kind of works out this way. The Macintosh was designed, think of the original, pulling the Mac out of a bag or whatever, for people, whereas PCs were designed to replace mainframes and minis and micros for IT departments. And they've both done very well. The whole, kind of Microsoft PC universe has infinite numbers of configurations. That's actually kind of a bad thing in terms of drivers and everything else. And the Macintosh is a walled garden. They are design Nazis in a good sense. And so everything in the Macintosh universe, it has been my experience, is aimed towards letting people, in this case, let's say, voice talent, do what they need to do, as opposed to becoming an expert on fixing corrupted registries and making backups and dealing with, viri and things like that. I know that's not a real word, but anyway, I like it. So there is this overall kind of gestalt that, starting with the introduction of QuickTime, which was specifically created as a core part of the OS to guarantee a lack of latency and a quality of service that would not be unintentionally or unexpectedly interrupted by some other process or processes, it's pretty simple to me. When I had the ISP, we supported 27 different OSs, including IRIX and AIX and AUX and Solaris and all that stuff. And when people would ask me this question, I had a very simple answer. I'd say, look, find the software that you like, whatever it is, get it, use it. Now, that being said, if you have a tech question, regardless of the time zone you're in or I'm in, you call me if you have a Macintosh. And if you have a PC, I'm sorry, homie can't do that. I can't offer you that service because of all the things we've just discussed. Sorry, end of lecture.
George, your way.
I'll try to keep it short, but it was a trick question, by the way. A Mac gets a PC. Anyway, no, just kidding. So there's, the tight integration of the OS and the hardware certainly allows for a lot of efficiency. Mac systems can run at a very high performance level with less hardware, which is, a trick that Apple gets to pull off because they control the vertical and the horizontal, and they make their own systems on a chip. And we've talked about this. You guys have talked about this on the show ad nauseum. There's a lot of Apple fans on the channel. But coming from the PC side, I was on the PC for many, many years. I was kind of nudged into using Mac by my own clients here in California and LA, mainly the actors who were encouraged early on. And I think because in that there was a momentum towards actors recording on Pro Tools, and because at the time Pro Tools was only on Mac, there was like a shove into the Mac sphere. Although there was a whole other world of PC people coming from radio who were still accustomed to PC because radio stations still pretty much all work and run on PC, and they were all using Cool Edit and Saw and all these other things. So there's always been a little bit of a split. And I'm going to ramble a little longer. The Mac side of things has also not been so great this year. I don't know, and I would love to know at Apple who was in charge of Sonoma, and I really hope that another team was hired to fix everything that they did in Sonoma and even in Ventura. What happened to the Finder in Ventura and Sonoma? Why is it so slow? What the heck happened at Apple? Anybody listening? Hello? It's terrible. It's definitely not all great. I mean, and it's not all great on both sides, but there's just so fewer variables that we as tech people have to deal with. And on our side of things, at George the Tech, we do have a hitman for PC problems, Windows systems, in the name of Mike McGonigal. Thank goodness for Mike. He's been busy. He's been pretty busy. We've been getting him a fair amount of work because, there's just more variables and more interesting things to deal with. And I will leave it here in that Jodi mentioned in the comments. If you're running Windows systems, absolutely subscribe to Driver Easy, because it does help you keep drivers drama-free, which is a huge part of being pain-free on a Windows system. So check out Driver Easy, as Jodi mentioned.
I'm tempted, and I think I'm going to throw a block of ice into the bubbling pot here. Mobile. There is so much weight, innovation, things like that happening in the mobile space, particularly since on the Apple mobile side, on iPhones and iPads and the rest of that, the M series chips that are in those are incredibly capable. I'm hearing more and more of my friends who do this kind of work who are going, hey, can I just use my phone or my iPad and create something for doing voiceover that doesn't need the big desktop PC? George, you raised your hand and waved at me, so dive in.
It's so frustrating. iOS, the way Apple uses the nomenclature of Pro on product is really kind of frustrating, because the iPad, especially the iPad Pro, is highly capable hardware with really crippled systems that, because it still needs to be user friendly and easy to use, and with that comes a lot of compromises in terms of like having an actual file system. In an iOS, iPhone, or any of the iOS type OSs that run on the mobile, there is no traditional file system in the way we think of it. You don't have a folder with all the files for that client, and then you can access, read, and write to that folder from any Apple you want app in a seamless way. And that is just one of the things that makes you feel like one hand's tied behind your back, when an iPad Pro, even a regular $300 iPad, power-wise, is absolutely sufficient to record and edit voiceover. It works fine. I've been using and telling people about Twisted Wave for years, because it's a slick little app that runs on everything now, but it runs on iOS, and it's pretty easy to use. It is still not as efficient and easy to use as a desktop system with a desktop user interface with a mouse and a full-size keyboard. So, that's the issue. The hardware's great. Just the iOS cripples you a little bit.
And I'm a crazy outlier. I've been doing all my voiceover for the past 7 years inside Final Cut in the voiceover module, because it's the same code as Logic. And
yeah, you've been saying that. I need to give a little bit of attention to that. I need to look at that. No.
It's a fascinating thing, and now that they're moving it onto the phones, because the iPad version of Final Cut is in there. In fact, I'm hoping to see some of the people at the Creative Summit next month to see what they're thinking, because they're pushing so much effort into these mobile devices. They have so much power, and you think if they can just connect the last few links in that, maybe there's something there for the future. And I would expect that if they can do it, the PC side of the world might have the same thing, and we might be able to get out of these monster desktop things, particularly for pros who are on the road a lot and have to work in hotel rooms or things like that to take care of your clients' needs. It'd be great to have smaller, faster, well-performing systems. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Viera, Florida, Andy Kokendorfer wants to know, what are your favorite EQ and compression settings for voiceover?
Oh, another it depends question. Dan Lenard, start us off here.
There is no set list of this is the setting you should have. Numbers don't mean anything. When we usually are working with people to try and get the sound right, everybody's different. Jodi mentioned this before. We're all snowflakes. Everybody's voice is different, and therefore there is no set standard for that sort of thing. If it's, we always had this saying on VoiceOver Body Shop, if it sounds good, it is good. And don't be so critical of your own voice to try and manipulate it. Do you use EQ? If say your microphone or your system is not bringing out the lower end of your voice right, you can add a little bit of stuff, but it's all by ear to what makes it sound right, not it's this number, it's that number, it's supposed to be like that. The idea is not to make you sound great. God, how many years have I been saying this, George? The idea is not to make you sound great. It's to make you sound like you, as you exist. And we don't talk to other people through EQ and compression and all these other things. Yeah, they have a place. but it still has to go by how it sounds to you. And that's the most important thing, because you're an artist, not an engineer, and you want to sound like you. And what is the performance you're giving, and how do you make it sound like you the best?
Byron?
The super short answer for this is very simple. None, nada, zip, zero. Bupkis. And the reason is very simple. In ancient analog days, when we were limited to one, count them, channel, or 2 or 4, or later 8, 16, 24, and so on, you had to commit. So if you had a drum set with 12 microphones on it, you could maybe stereo and a separate for the kick if you were lucky, out of 16 or 24. And that was it. You were stuck with it forever. Now we have infinite numbers of tracks because they're all virtual. They're digital. And thanks God we got tiny 2-bit float. So now you don't need to make any of those decisions initially. Now comes the second part. Anybody that's doing pro stuff is typically handing this off to someone whose job it is in the context of the rest of the project to make those decisions. So again, that's why you would never, in this kind of a situation, use any kind of processing. I mean, even on Audition, maybe I'll go in and manually edit out breaths, or I'll put in a high-pass filter to get rid of truck rumble or things like that. But that's it. Now, if you're delivering the finished product, it's a different story, and it's all about basically serving the needs of your customer. So, quick story, I used to teach multi-track engineering and record production, and one time I threw together a rough mix, and somebody said, "Wow, how did you do that? It sounds like a record." I said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you my secret, but you can't tell anybody else. Here's what you do. When it comes to the echo send gain or anything else, what you do is you listen really carefully. And if it's too loud, you turn it down. And if it's too soft, you turn it up." And that's the answer to how much compression and what the setting should be and where the knee should be and the release time and everything else.
George.
Oh boy, if it was that easy. So yeah, I know everybody's right. Of course, I've hung my hat on one service that I provide called creating stacks, and this is definitely something that has been a little controversial because perhaps maybe it's used when it shouldn't be. But basically, the idea being that a lot of what the actors are being called upon today is, unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, is the jobs of the actor is to deliver a finished product. It's a shame. As I said at the beginning, there's a lot being foisted on the actor's shoulders, especially on online casting sites where you're often just sending in a file that's going to end up as an explainer on a YouTube video, and they don't know anything about mixing and production, so you have to do it all. So for that reason, I make these settings for people on whatever DAW they're using to make it a little easier for them. And so I'll give you a straight answer. If you're going to use a compressor, do not use more than 3-to-1 compression. Use somewhere between 2-to-1 and 3-to-1, maybe a little even below 2-to-1 for commercial work. The bigger the budget and the more ears they're going to hear it on television, the less processing you're probably going to use because they like it really, really, really natural sounding. And then in terms of EQ, EQ is very tricky. You have to be really, really tuned to your hearing and your monitoring environment, whether it's headphones or monitors. You have to be extremely familiar with what you're hearing is to be sure that it's actually translating and accurate to the real world. So for that reason, EQ tuning is really tricky and should be left to somebody that knows their environment really well. But whatever you do small amounts. So never boost more than 3 to 4 dB. Sometimes cut more than 3 to 4 dB when absolutely necessary because your room is really boomy or you have a very harsh S and it's nailing you between 2 to 4,000 K, or for women 6 to 10,000 K, and make a small scoop there. But do things subtly. And then listen to it back in multiple places if you're not totally sure. Listen to it back on your laptop. Listen to it back in your car so you can hear the way those changes translate.
I'm going to call next on our friend Mickey Makachor, who's recently back from a little sports thing that happened in Paris on the audio team. Mickey, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, panelists don't usually jump in during when there are guests, but it's certainly something in my wheelhouse. There are a couple sides to this. First thing is if you pick a mic that works well with your voice in the environment that you're recording, and you don't really need to do much, so start with that. Start with good recordings. Get it good at the source with a mic that works well with your voice. Every single mic sounds different, so audition mics. Try them out. See what works best. I totally agree with Byron regarding like the best amount of processing is none, at least from within the recording stage of the production. And what EQ and what compression settings work best, if you are doing some processing, it varies from use case to use case. Say you're doing something that has character voices, audiobooks, animation, stuff like that, or even say, if you have creature voices for narrative films. There are times when a character is meant to sound harsh and annoying and really hard to listen to. There are characters that are meant to be like that. All of that comes across, of course, in the performance, the acting. But we do help that a little bit by pushing harsher frequencies harder, so that we're supporting from the technical side what the performers have given us on the artistic side. So it really varies what processing you do. Sometimes, the more annoying folks, compress them a little more so that they're more sharp and punchy. It really, really varies.
I like the more annoying
George,
folks.
Go ahead, George.
Sorry, Bill. I couldn't resist.
That's all right. No problem.
That's true. Yeah, the elephant in the room. That's not the elephant in the room. The thing that nobody said yet, the word that has not been uttered yet. Say it with me. Acoustics. Nobody's mentioned acoustics. Everybody's heads are nodding. If you saw Mickey there, you don't normally get to see Mickey, but if you see Mickey, you'll see that the entire wall behind Mickey is acoustical absorption panels. That is a big part to why he sounds so good on that AKG 414 or 214, I'm not sure which. And 414, yes, of course, he wouldn't dare to use a 214. And so it's a huge, huge part of it. And so when a room is set up correctly for recording voice, and it's been tuned for recording voice, whether it's your closet, whether it's a booth, and don't assume that just because you spent $10,000 to $15,000 on your booth that it is properly acoustically tuned, because it almost never is. That is way more important and much harder to correct for with EQ and other tuning. The problems that occur in a small room where sound waves continue to bounce in all three directions, X, Y, Z axis, create many, many little collisions of those waves called nodes, and they create comb filters, which are little peaks and dives in the EQ that create all sorts of weirdness. It's the sound that people call, I sound like I'm in a box. I sound like I'm in a tube. I sound tinny. Those are much harder to correct with EQ. So deal with that stuff first acoustically. And if you need help with that, that's the kind of stuff that we do.
I also just want to make a comment. I'm getting more and more requests. Once upon a time, I did all my work at studios. It went off to an engineer. Somebody was looking at the waves, making them right. If it needed a little more punch to get through the music better, something like that, they would take care of it. That is all, not all gone away, but it's largely gone away. And a lot of talent now are responsible for their own engineering. So what I'm seeing more and more is I have to talk to my clients and say, are you going to send this to somebody who's going to post-process it, or is this going direct from you to the web and that's it? Nothing else is going to happen. So for me, the decision to deliver a wet or a dry mix, something with effects, or just the clean, pure recording and let them handle it is something I have to deal with more than I have before. Mickey, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on what George mentioned. What I meant about the annoying people, like the more annoying characters, talking about like the story-wise, people that have to sound, harsh, and maybe the protagonist perhaps in a storyline, be it narrative, be it, but we talked earlier about reality shows. We do that a lot. When the storyline points to someone being like this annoying character in a reality show, we make them sound annoying.
Byron, you wanted to get back in on this?
I do. And the reason that I didn't, well, nobody mentioned acoustics is because ironically, it's so important. People don't understand, they have ADLS, attention deficit, look shiny, microphones, things like that. And let me make it incredibly simple. By the way, the panels behind me are not just my daughter's artwork, but they're a pressure molded wood substrate tray that has ripples in it. So it is both a diffuser and in front of it is loaded with rock wool, and it's an absorber. It's both, a floor wax and a dessert topping. So the bottom line is this. You can have an incredibly, expensive, a $4,000 Neumann U87i. And if you put it in a bathroom, you know what it's going to sound like. And you can take a $250 Rode NT1 with 32-bit full, he said, pushing that, and put it in a great space, and it's incredible. You can even take a lowly $50 Chinese no-name microphone, and if it's in a great acoustic space, it will sound wonderful, minus its inherent flaws. There you go.
Courtney, you wanted to touch base real quick? We got a lot of questions coming up, though. So.
Sure, I just wanted to concur with Byron that record dry, coming from film sound, production sound, recording and film, you always want to record everything that's there and wait till post-production to apply any kind of EQ or effects because you got much better tools to use there. And once you apply and bake in that EQ or compression, it's really hard to take it out. So treat your acoustical environment to try and get that as little of a contribution to your sound as possible and concentrate on your performance and work out the details of the EQ and the compression later where you got many more tools and you can try it over and over and over again without messing up your original recording.
Yeah, once you mix the blue and yellow paint, you get green, and it's really hard to get back to yellow after you've done that. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Mickey McAture in the Philippines and here on the panel. It says, what pet peeves or habits of engineers, producers, and directors do you wish they would, do you wish they would stop doing? Like clearing
George, start us off.
It's a really good question. And it's something that, one thing that's kind of frustrating is that I don't get to be in a panel. And this is now I'm sparking my gears now because it'd be great to be on a panel with or have a roundtable with engineers and directors and talk to them about what they need or don't need but the question directly being what's a pet peeve? I would say just treat the actor like you're all on the same team, right? Because the actor is foisted with a huge amount of duty, a huge amount of stress around the technology. Just because they've been doing it for 20 years does not mean that this session is easier today due to technology than it was 10 or 20 years ago. They have a lot of different tools they have to maintain and operate because there's so many different software tools like Source Connect and Session Link Pro and IPDTL and Connection Open and Clean Feed and oh my gosh, the list goes on and on. So give them an opportunity to tech their stuff before they get on with the client. And just be encouraging of them and understand that you, the actor or the director, and you guys are all on one, you kind of are on one team, and the client is the other team. So be on the same team and be supportive of the actor and give them a chance to correct little things and give them a chance to test things and nurture them, because they're under a lot of stress, especially if it's a new client. Especially if it's a big national campaign. They're already a little bit stressed about the session itself, let alone the technology. So anything you can do to make them feel supported is hugely helpful. And if something doesn't sound right, speak up. That's your job as the engineer. If you're literally recording the session, I've heard horror stories of my clients, the actors, having to re-record something even after it was engineered by an engineer, because the client said there was a problem with the audio. That's your job, to speak up and get it corrected, right on the spot, because that is literally your job.
Byron?
I really only have one pet peeve in terms of engineers, producers, directors, casting agents, and that's not hiring me. That's really annoying when they don't hire me.
When you figure out how to fix that, would you please let us all know?
Now, to flip it around, when I'm the producer, I'm the director, and I'm working with, and this is the ultimate tell that you're working with new talent, and it's really annoying, and they don't understand. They'll apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. And that's it. They don't understand. All they're doing is taking time away from the session and making it less productive. And so, yes, beat them into submission about whatever happens, including if your hair's on fire. Don't apologize. Just keep going.
Jodi?
I would say communication. This is one of the biggest pet peeves that I have. And actually, it doesn't come up a whole lot. I am lucky that I work with really good engineers who keep me in the loop and let me know what's going on. But more often than not, this is a completely remote session. I don't see anyone. I'm just sitting sitting in my booth, recording, and they open up the, talk back whenever they want. And I don't have any other communication with anyone unless they let me in on the situation, right? So the engineer is really my only ally in that, because the client's not going to think about it. The client doesn't care. The client wants me when they want me. It's kind of the engineer that's there to let me know what's going on. So, for instance, if I've recorded something, it took us about 20 minutes to get whatever they want, and they're going to go off and let the end client listen to it and whatever, and I have to sit around and wait for them to figure out whether they've got what they need. I need the engineer to tell me, well, are we looking, 20 minutes pass and I haven't heard anything, what's happening? How are things going? Are we going to be here another hour or 5 minutes? Like, do you know what's going on? And I hate asking because it makes me feel like I'm being needy, Oh, the artiste is being a problem, right? Don't make me feel like that. Please. I'm just trying to do my job.
We could have a whole show on emotional management in that stressful situation, I think. Dan?
This is slightly a different tack on this, because trying to suggest, to other people when we consult with people on how to do their studios and things like that. Here's the big pet peeve I have about engineers. Don't talk about what you do to the casting directors. Because they give this, it's like, well, I'm adding this much and I'm doing this, and they've got to have one of these and they've got to have one of these things. And then the casting directors or clients or agents are saying, well, you got to have one of these things and you've got to have a third and cadoodle thing. And they have no idea what on earth the engineer is talking about, and they're passing this information on to people who are like, "Oh, now I got to spend $1,000 on this microphone." Or
you need one of them Neumann MTL 101s. I think that's what you're supposed to buy. Yeah,
exactly, and that's a big problem. Understand that you're dealing with talent and not an engineer. I mean, yes, we're saying yes, you need to be more of an engineer, but having the equipment is nothing compared to knowing how to use it. It's as simple as that. And what I like to always say is, yeah, you can get a better microphone, but it's not going to change the way you read copy.
George, real quick. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'll relate a very quick story that I have zero firsthand knowledge about. But Ernie Anderson was very, very famous for not wanting to be trapped in his booth in the station or at the studio. And there was a lot of reasons for that. Some people thought it was just because he didn't like people talking crap about him. But he felt super isolated from what was going on in production. And I can understand that now, hearing Jodi's perspective. As an actor, you're locked away behind a telephone wire, and you're not really on. You're not in, and you're not feeling connected at all. It's a very isolating, disconnected thing. So Ernie was insisted, put me in the damn control room, stick a mic in front of me, that'll work, something that looks kind of like this. So it rejects all the machine room noise, and those rooms were pretty noisy back then, and let me record in the same room with everybody else. And it changed the way a lot of voice work was probably done from that point forward. And it certainly didn't change what microphones that we used, because the shotgun mic became a big thing, the Sennheiser 416, kind of thanks to Ernie.
I'm sitting in front of one right now. For me, the only thing that ever really bothered me was clients, and very few of them, and very occasionally they're all the newbies who would do line readings for me of everything in the spot before they let me take a shot at it. It's like, you've hired me. Let me at least get one out and see if you like it before you tell me how every line should be delivered. Anyway, next question.
Yeah, Bill, can you give it to me a little more Morgan Freeman-ish? Right, the next question comes in from George Whittam here on the panel from Venice, California. How do your voiceover work and podcasting efforts support each other?
Jodi?
Well, I have a podcast that talks about sound. So it kind of has a pretty big correlation with what I do. So I talk, it's called audio branding, and I talk about the power of sound and how it influences our buying decisions, which is a lot of what we are talking about here, and why voiceovers do what they do, and how it influences our daily lives too. So I am able to interview and speak more directly with the people that hire me. That's kind of the point of the podcast. So understanding what it is they need, that really helps me, and it helps a lot of people who are listening. And it helps a lot of people understand the role that the voiceover might play in their advertising efforts. Because, and again, we were talking about this in the context of AI. When you're using a voice, and Bill, you even said this before, when you're using an AI voice, it makes it sound like you don't care about your product or your service. It makes it sound like you're just putting out whatever is out there to get the words out there. You're not really putting any thought or consideration into how you're presenting your company. And your company is being presented by the audio that you are putting out there, whether you like it or not. So sound is how we reach our hearts. Sound is how we make our decisions. We do not buy based on logic. We buy based on emotion. And you reach people through sound with emotion. That's how we make connections with one another. So when you cheap out on that sound, it makes your company, it makes your brand sound cheap. You do not want to do that. That's the biggest problem here. That's a lot of what I talk about on the podcast. So yeah, they do go hand in hand, and definitely they help each other. And I'm hoping to spread that message as much as I possibly can, because it's really important. People have BS-o-meters these days that are so high, like they can tell BS from a mile away. Don't give them BS. Be authentic, be genuine, have a company you're proud of, and use audio that actually puts that into perspective, that actually shows them you care.
And if you give them BS, make sure it's VO BS.
Yeah, exactly.
You were waiting for that, weren't you, George? Well, to your point, I mean, that's part of the deepest part of our brains, I think. We've always analyzed what people were saying to us in terms of, are they angry? Are they calm? That emotional carry information is critical to human safety and always has been. So getting that wrong can be a big thing. I wish we could keep going on this for hours and hours. We have a lot of stuff to cover. We have a good bunch of questions that we haven't got to. Hopefully maybe we can do this again sometime very soon. To our unbelievably experienced and wise panel, thank you so much for showing up today and being a part of the Office Hours community and making this all work. We are heading out. I've got a couple of bits of business to do. Don't forget, we are here all the rest of the week with our regular shows. On the weekends, we have kind of a more relaxed and philosophical bent to what we do here at Office Hours. We hope you want to get involved. If you want to get involved with what we do here at Office Hours, go to officehours.global, sign up, and you can follow the path and get all the benefits of what we do here every day. Our Talak Traversal today, we have gone 81,000 miles. What that means is if you had to go to the people for the expertise that you've gotten today, travel, talk to them, come away with this information, you would have had to travel at least that far. That's 130,000 kilometers for our global audience. And as we like to say here, that's 640 million bananas for scale. Thanks for watching. We will be back tomorrow with another show. You guys did a fabulous job. Thank you all.
Do we still whisper at the end like that?
No, we've stopped whispering. I don't know why. I don't know why we ever started it.
You were whispering at the end? Why?
Yeah, we used to whisper. I don't know. Alex started it. It took off. And everybody's, why you guys whisper at
Whisper
the
over
end?
the credits.
Okay.
But you had to whisper articulately so that people could understand you're whispering. You couldn't just whisper and not have them understand.
You're doing ASMR right now.
That's the only time you should be close to a microphone.
I invite you all
guys
to
are
take
great.
the
Thank you.
transcript of this.
Very
Take the
good.
transcript of this podcast, paste it into Notebook LM from Google, and then have it read it as a podcast, and then compare the results.
Oh my
Nice.
God.
Nice.
Comes runway after all of us.
Thank you, guys. I wish I could absorb the knowledge of this room every morning the way you guys share knowledge. It's unbelievable.
It's
Thanks
been
for
a
what you
whole
guys are
new
doing.
education.
I can't believe